Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the transcendental virtues. Now, an easy way to understand the transcendental virtues is to, break it down. What does the word trans mean? Well, it means to go across or beyond something. The transcendental virtues are virtues that exceed our understanding, that we can grasp and reach at, but that at some point always lie kind of beyond us. But that's not only a negative way to look at it. Think of the positives that entails as well. Certainly, it is sad that we can't always grasp these virtues, but because they are always beyond us, that means that they can span across cultures and across creeds, which is especially important as we're talking about, faith and religion and God, especially God, a person that can span across all kinds of different backgrounds. So first, let's look at the transcendental virtue, beauty. Beauty, as I defined in our PowerPoint, is a combination of qualities such as shape, color, or form that pleases the senses. Now, a key thing to note here is that it's pleasing to the senses. Now, what are the senses? Well, it's taste, touch, smell, hearing, and taste, touch, smell, hearing. Oh, and sight, obviously. My girlfriend's going to hate me for forgetting that. She's an optometry student. These senses are the ways that we experience beauty. And that's key to understand. Why? Because beauty isn't something that lies only completely beyond us, right? It's something that we can, in a way, grasp. Now, how can we experience beauty in these different ways? Well, just follow the PowerPoint. That's kind of the easy way to know. Taste. Well, sure, you might not have ever considered something that you've tasted to be beautiful, but every time that your mom or grandma or dad cooks you something that you really, really love, well, you're experiencing the beauty of that food. Every single time that you play a sport, for example, you're getting to experience the beauty of the touch of that sport. Every single time that you get to listen to music, not just random music, but maybe something particularly widespread across our culture, right? That would be beautiful. It doesn't simply have to be classical music. It can be any kind of sound that you and other people find to be beautiful. Take smell, for instance, like perfume or incense. Those things are beautiful. There's not only an objective quality to beauty. There's also an absolute and to an extent subjective quality to beauty because, beauty is in a sense in the eye of the beholder, not in the eye of the beholder, the eye of the beholder. Now finally here, the most important way that we experience beauty is the way that we experience it every day, which is through our sight. I have a video for you that I curated that I really encourage you to watch. It's amazing because it breaks down, how does light travel? Which is really, really cool, and I don't want to spoil anything, but you'll get to see light in a way that you've never seen it before. And this light colors everything that we see. And getting to see it in a new way is yet another facet of why beauty always lies beyond us, because there's always new ways of experiencing something. And once even as a human race we've exhausted all the ways that we can experience beauty, there's still an absolute character to beauty that always lies beyond us. Now, let's move on to truth. Truth is that which is in accord with reality. Now, let's skip over to subjective truth. What is subjective truth? Well, it's truth according to the subject. So, you or me. I might believe that mint chocolate chip or chocolate ice cream is the best kind of ice cream in the world. You, on the other hand, might like a good boysenberry ice cream, which is totally fine. I think it's a bit of a weird flavor, but good for you. The point is that my taste in ice cream and your taste in ice cream are okay if they're different, because those are our subjective realities. And subjective reality can and sometimes should be different. I like the foods that I like, you like the foods that you like, and I'm okay that you don't like the foods that I like because it means, at the end of the day, more for me. So, just briefly to go back over that, subjective truth is a truth that's dictated by the subject, i.e. me. Objective truth is truth that's dictated by the object. What is it that we're talking about? So for example, if there was some sort of a best ice cream flavor, that would dictate the truth. But all of our taste buds are subjective, so it's a subjective truth. An objective truth is like whether the earth orbits the sun or not, whether the earth is flat, whether vaccines are good for you, right? These are objectively true things. Vaccines are good for you. The earth is round. The sun orbits the, the earth orbits the sun. These things are objectively true. They're dictated by the object's reality. Now, there are times and places where people might disagree with what's objectively true. Does that change what's objectively true? No, it doesn't. Because subjective truth is on a lower, lower on the totem pole than objective truth. The subject might think of it as being one way, but the object really dictates what's real. The sun is the center of our solar system. That's why it's called a solar system. The earth is round. Just look at any picture of the earth from space. Or even just like from, 50 stories high, and you can see the curvature of the earth. These kinds of things. So again, it's truth based on the object's reality. And finally, the highest quality of truth is absolute truth. Now, what is absolute truth? Absolute truth is truth that exists in all times and in all places. Now, let's take a look at our other examples. Will I always think that mint chocolate chip ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream? No, because there was a time before me when I did not have that opinion. For example, there was a time in 1996 when I wasn't alive. And that's okay. But that just means that I did not always have the opinion that mint chocolate chip was a good ice cream flavor. I didn't always exist. In a similar way, I won't always exist. I will be dead at some point. And that's okay. But that means that my subjective opinion isn't absolute. In a similar way, the sun has not always existed. Sure, the earth currently revolves around the sun, but it won't always, because in a couple billion years, the sun will die. And that's okay. And the sun hasn't always been. There was a time before the sun. And yeah, sure, it's super, super old, and it's a really long time, but it's not an absolute truth. It's not going to exist in all times and in all places that the earth revolves around the sun. What is an absolute truth? Well, a triangle can't have four sides. That's an example of an absolute truth. Why? Because it's in the definition of the triangle that it can't have four sides. What's another example of absolute truth? That God is good. It's in the definition of who God is that He is good. That God is all-powerful. It's in the definition of who God is that God would be all-powerful. Those sorts of things fall under the category of absolute truth, which is the highest quality of truth that we can possibly understand. Now, finally, let's move on to the good. Again, you shouldn't be writing down the definitions for beauty or the singular definition of truth, although you do need to know those three definitions that I gave you. You need to be able to distinguish between subjective, objective, and absolute. And you don't need to write down the definition for good that I provided for you just in case you didn't know or didn't have your own idea of what it is. But let's move on to the slide, is goodness subjective? No. Goodness is not subjective. Goodness is an absolute value. Last week we talked about the four different qualities of law: human law, natural law, divine law, and eternal law. Truth and morality and goodness fall under, well, these characters of absolute laws. They're things that don't ever change. The laws that govern the universe, natural law, is an absolute truth. It will always be. Natural law is broken down into those, again, four characters. So even though there haven't always been humans and there won't always be nature, still there will always be the divine law and the eternal law. Now, is goodness subjective? No, it's not. And I have here an example of John Chow. I hope that I'm pronouncing his name correctly. John Chow is a Christian missionary to coastal islands off of right outside of India. While he went to one island, he died. He was murdered by the tribe that he was seeking to evangelize. Now, the Indian government came back and said, well, we forbade anybody from going there, and we can't prosecute those people on the island because it's their cultural belief that murdering outsiders is the right thing to do. Now, taking out all of the other things, is murder a good thing? No, murder is not a good thing. So even if we could say that there might be some self-defense argument, and self-defense does not make murder good, it just takes away your culpability. So even though the thing that you did was bad, you were trying to protect yourself, and that was a good reason. Okay, so That's more or less okay. We'll talk about that later. Don't worry about that example too much. But the fact of the matter is that the Indian government didn't want to prosecute these natives because it was their cultural belief that you could murder people, right? We do not agree with that. Nobody, or most people, should not agree with that, right? Murdering somebody shouldn't be a cultural thing. Say, for example, that there was a Satanist church in the United States that believed that rounding up young women or men and executing them on an altar to Satan was the right thing to do. We wouldn't think that that's okay to do for 1,000 different reasons. But most importantly, because you shouldn't murder people. And even if it's a part of your religious right, we don't believe that that's a good thing. Okay? Is morality subjective? No, it's not. It's absolute. It's based on those natural laws. And in this case, that all human beings have dignity and should not be murdered. Okay? So that ends our lecture for today on the transcendental virtues. Now, why are they so important? The transcendental virtues, again, are the way that we understand stories to be told. All good stories have aspects of these transcendental virtues throughout. Why should you have this detailed understanding of them? Well, if I were to blindfold you and send you into a room and tell you to go find it, you would ask me, rightfully so, what is it? Well, now you know what you're looking for whenever you look at a story. You should be looking for beauty and truth and goodness and try to find them. And as we get into the greatest story ever told in the sacred scriptures, hopefully you'll be able to access those truths. And we'll talk about the different ways to read into those truths in Scripture later on. But hopefully this has given you a good place to begin as we start talking about the nature of stories and the great story, the great love story that God has written for us. Thanks everybody for your attention today. See you tomorrow.